Welcome to episode 67 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, by my interview guests, and listeners who contact the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners. Thanks to Twitter, I heard from school librarians in Catalonia, to Jessica in the UAE, Lorraine in Australia, Christina in Maryland, Stephanie in North Carolina, Chelsea in Michigan, Sarah in Oklahoma, and Christy in Tennessee. Christy was kind enough to send a message. She wrote, quote, "Your podcast helped me get through the beginning of this year as a first-year librarian. I didn't even know what I didn't know at that point. I learned so much from your episodes." End quote. And to Christy's point, so much of our jobs is seasonal and it's affected by the school calendar. And until any of us have an entire school year behind us, we won't fully realize the demands of our job. And that is a bit ironic when you think about it, because there is nothing that we are currently going through right now which would be considered ordinary. So having the schools closed for extended periods of time, I think we are all, it's fair to say, in uncharted territory, because we've never had our schools closed this long unexpectedly in the middle of the school year. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how we all come back to our buildings when we eventually do. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, questions, and episode suggestions either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Selfishly, I did want to mention something noteworthy about this week. March 31st, 2018 is the birthday of this podcast. School Librarians United is 2 years old. I didn't broadcast an episode until August of 2018, but March 31st, this podcast had a name, an email, and a logo. And now for today's episode and my interview with Angela Wojtecki. I am so excited to be having this conversation and be able to share it with you. And I'm going to ask Angela to pronounce her last name because I will butcher it. So, Angela, welcome to the podcast. And for the benefit of all of us, would you please pronounce your last name?
Sure. It's Wojtecki. So the J is silent.
Got it.
So
Wojtecki.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. So, Angela, we are 1 week into our COVID closures, and while I don't want to belabor the point, let's definitely address. You're in Ohio, I'm in Michigan. We closed about the same time. How are you doing after 1 week of school closings, and how are you supporting your students and your staff?
Well, I would have to say, if there's one word to sum up this past week, it'd be whirlwind. Because I really feel like, I think all of us feel like we have to kind of rebalance our life, and life is looking a lot different for most of us, or all of us actually, and it's a very overwhelming time period. My role in my school is really it's a tech and a library role, so I kind of balance them both, and I will say that the tech role has really kind of kicked in this week. I've been answering hundreds of emails from my teachers, from students. We are a one-to-one district, so we are one-to-one Chromebooks. And so luckily our students have devices in grades 3 through 12. And so I feel like right now it's really kind of the time where we're really relying on that technology piece, and the teachers are really looking for guidance and ideas. So it's been an adjustment, and it's been I can't even wrap my head around it sometimes. And I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just one of those things, like it's a new normal for a little bit, and we kind of have to figure out how to restructure our time and restructure our days. And, and I am a new mom. And so I have a baby at home. And so navigating working with a baby crying in the background, or needing, to be fed or that type of thing, it is definitely an adjustment.
Yeah, I always feel very selfish that I am taking young and new parents away from this valuable, say, nap time when your children are down and you could be doing something on your own. Can I ask, when you're supporting your students and your staff, what are you mostly going through emails? Are you pushing it out on an LMS? How do you find that you are supporting your buildings this way?
So a couple different ways. So I've started, definitely answering emails, personal one-to-one emails with individual needs, has definitely been kind of the most time consuming for me. Also, we use Google Meet. So we have actually turned that on district wide. It was turned off for privacy reasons. And then we decided to turn it on considering what's going on right now. So now that it's on, I've been doing Google Meets with teachers individually, which has been helpful because I can share my screen and show them exactly, where to click, and providing that type of tech support is really helpful. And then this past Friday, I actually hosted with another colleague of mine a Google Meet kind of for our teachers to just join. So we had 25 teachers join, which I was rather happy with that. And basically it was a Q&A session, and it was a way for us to kind of check in with each other, a way for people to ask questions if they were, struggling with something. And we had our tech director on and our curriculum director on, so they were able to provide some guidance too. So it was just a really good kind of face-to-face conversation. And I feel like we really need that right now, just as much as the students need that. We need that. So we're really utilizing that Google Meet, and it's going really, really well. And I think we're going to continue to do these weekly check-in type of meets, just because I think it helps everybody feel a little bit more connected.
No, I agree. So I'm really grateful. And listeners, I talked to Angela. We wanted to address COVID, but we really want to focus today on all the things that Angela brings in terms of her expertise. So we are going to shift gears, but thank you, Angela, for indulging me, because right now there really is, I don't think we can sort of ignore the elephant in the middle of the room. First of all, friends, I became familiar with Angela because she is a very brave person. A couple episodes ago, I called out for a guest to volunteer to speak to us about student voice, and Angela very generously volunteered. So I'm grateful. So Angela, before we get invested in this, when I was cyber stalking you, I noticed that you got you are a certified Google educator level 1 and 2. You knocked this out in a calendar year. Mm-hmm. So number 1, would you recommend that to most mortals? And number 2, how do you feel achieving this goal has helped you professionally?
Yes. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, when I first started in the district I'm in now, this is my 8th year. And the very first year I started is when we went Google. And I basically saw that as my opportunity to become an expert in something and become a leader in something. And I firmly believe if you are a leader in your library, you're a leader in your school, and in your community too. So what I did is basically I became a Google trainer first. So and the rules for that have changed, and the stipulations for that have changed since I have taken it. But it was very intense. I spent an entire summer becoming a Google certified trainer. And then a couple years later, they rolled out the educator exams. And because of my role in the district as kind of a professional development leader when it comes to educational technology, I really felt like I needed to get these certifications, because if I'm going to help teachers use Google, I really needed to be familiar with it and able to help them. So I did level 1 and 2, and I use Google all the time. So for me, level 1 was pretty simple, just because it is kind of everyday use, Gmail, Google Docs, that type of thing. Level 2 was kind of kicked it up a little bit. And I did have to study a little bit for it, but it's all free and it's all online. All of the practice tests and that type of thing to prepare you, it's all free through Google. So, I think that it really helped me to help my teachers and to help them feel comfortable. And it really made me comfortable using the technology so that I could then teach it and help my teachers with it and my students.
Well, and I think that anytime we can demonstrate to not just our teachers, but also to the administration that school librarians bring, not just the space, not just the collections, but we ourselves are resources. And I think that having this sort of designation of being a level 1 and level 2 gives you a sign of expertise that really allows people to have some trust in the direction that your PD is taking. So you mentioned that you're in charge of PD. I love that because I think I have unfortunately been more in a reactive position for PD. I've been told, hey, we have been given this afternoon for PD or this day as PD. I know election day for us is PD, but we're oftentimes being told how we're going to be spending that time. Mm-hmm. You are you are in charge of the PD in your district. How do you balance the needs of the district and the needs of your people, your staff?
It is definitely a challenge. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. But luckily, I have the support of my curriculum director, who basically allows me the freedom to kind of plan for what the needs are. And I think that's huge. I think having that ability to kind of see in the library environment, see the needs that the students are having, see the needs that the teachers may be having in conversations with them, and then build the development around that. So it really is kind of a needs-based, thing. When we first went Google, though, I did so much training on Google Classroom and how to use that and using Google Docs and Google Drive. And I continue to do that with updates. Of course, that happens. But the one thing that I always say is that, we learn best when we learn from each other. And so I really think it's important to make that connections with my teachers and kind of hear out what they are, struggling with or what would be helpful for them, and then building development on, professional development on them. And I'm lucky enough that in our district, I get a full day, a full in-service day that I can plan a conference. So it's basically a full conference that our own teachers present sessions on. And because I work with so many, K-12 teachers, I'm able to kind of hone in and call some teachers and say, hey, are you able to present on Seesaw? Because you're using it a lot in the classroom and it's going really well. So that helps me kind of have an eagle-eye vision of kind of what's going on. So I feel very blessed that I'm in a district where I'm able to kind of wear both hats. And definitely have the freedom. I mean, it is a lot of extra work in terms of evenings and in terms of, balancing what's going on in the library. But I do have a flex schedule in my library. So I don't have students coming in during, set times, which allows me a little bit more flexibility to meet with teachers.
Well, and I think that teachers, regardless of what we do, I think we do appreciate when we can learn from our peers rather than having the district bring in consultants. I have been aware of some resentment when the district decides to spend a great deal of money on bringing in people who are consultants and are not part of our district. And so I think it's a really good decision to tap that expertise that you have in the building, because those teachers have already built a rapport with their peers. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a smart direction to take. You are a district librarian, and I haven't really had a chance to interview too many of them. And I'll be honest, we have an episode planned for the spring, fingers crossed. And clearly, being a district librarian, there comes some unique challenges, but also some fantastic opportunities. What would you say to somebody who is either applying for a district librarian job or has just landed that job?
I would say that they really need to be able to multitask in a whole new way. Because it is like I said, it is a challenge. And I think too, you can't have too many goals. And that being said, I mean, you can have a vision for your district and a vision for your school libraries. And we do have that in mind. However, our priorities, we stick to a few projects as a district. I'm lucky I have aides in all of my buildings. So there's 6 buildings in my district and I have aides in them. Some are only part-time, some are full-time. It just depends on the building, but I'm lucky enough that I do get time with them to do some professional development and to help them out. And I do all of the collection development for the district. So definitely kind of setting priorities and making sure that, that I'm, kind of staying on top of things and not getting too far behind when it comes to collection development or that type of thing. It's something that, I'd like to do though. I think I love the library environment, and if they would ever take me away from it, I don't know what I would do, because I just love being in the library. So, but yeah, it definitely make priorities and don't think you can accomplish everything, right away. And, for example, I genreified my high school library, and that was a huge undertaking. That took about a year. And luckily I had a full-time library aide to help me with that process. But we are just now genreifying, another building right now. So it wasn't like, okay, this is, we're going to do this all in 2 school years. It could take a little bit longer. And that's okay.
Well, I think somebody who I've had experience both working with having an assistant for 7 years, or I guess 6 years. And for 7 years, I worked exclusively with parent volunteers and student aides. And I think that there's opportunities with both. It sounds like there's a considerable amount of your job that involves like a human resources component, because you are giving, I don't want to use the word directives, you are instructing because you have aides who work in proxy of a school librarian in those schools. So in some way you do have to gently give these directions that are expected to be followed to see through the vision of a school librarian when there isn't one there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And, an example of collection development where I do rely on my aides to help is that, we use Tidal Wave is our platform, and they have the wish list feature. And so what's the beauty of it is that they can create wish lists based on, student choices or student recommendations, and they can share that with me so that when I am ordering books, I can look at their lists, and they can even make notes within their lists of, why they're adding that title. And basically, again, I can't be everywhere. I wish they could clone me, but they can't. So it's in the elementary setting. I don't know what books are flying off the shelves. I just don't. I can't be there all the time. So it helps to kind of have that. And I feel like they then feel like my aides feel like they've got input into what's coming in their library as well.
Of course. Well, that's a nice segue to our topic today, which is student voice. And it is, I'm so grateful that you volunteered, because I only come from the elementary perspective, and because of your experiences working as a district librarian, I really feel like you can speak more to some of these programs that you have in the middle school and the high school. So I'd love to hear how you integrate student voice in your collection. You mentioned a little bit with the Tidal Wave wish list, but in your programming as well. So I take it away. Tell me, and friends, I will say, because I know this already, Angela has very generously shared some resources in the show notes. So please, after this episode is over, make sure to go and visit the show notes, because I think it really does help bring this conversation together. So, Angela, take it away. A student voice in your library.
So I love working with high school students. And it's definitely, again, another passion of mine is just, that age and that time in their life. I just love, and I have a passion for that. And so, when I first started in the district, there was an elective course that the students could take where they basically worked in the library. And to be honest, it was kind of a bare bones course. It was basically they come in every day, they sit at the circ desk, and you train them how to check books in and out. And I felt like, my first year kind of witnessing this and seeing how it was going, I was just kind of like, oh, they could do so much more. And high school students want to do so much more. It kind of just became a study hall where they helped us out in the library. And I just felt like if they're getting a grade in this class, there needed to be more than just sitting at a circ desk. So we renamed it Library Ambassadors. And part of the course is that they promote our library. So it's a customer service expectation. They work like they would work in a public library setting. And I tell them that from day one. In order to take the class, I do have to sign off on it and basically say that, they met with me and that I feel like they would be a good fit, because again, not every student is a good fit for this. They need to be able to work independently. They need to be able to multitask. They need to be able to follow instructions without me or somebody, telling them step by step how to do things. And so we have that conversation. I sign on the course sheet, and then they're enrolled in the class. And part of it is a course, and I do make the expectations that they read independent reading for fun. So basically, they are expected to read books. They're supposed to love the library environment, love reading. That's kind of part of it, because I want them to pass that on to the fellow students that come into the library. Part of the course is, again, I usually have 1 to 2 students per period during the school day.
Wow.
And that way, the students, there's always a student in the library to help.
Wow. So I thought it was sort of like, hey, first hour are my library ambassadors. No, you have a staff. Mm-hmm. And do you also then have a district assistant?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You're like tripping over help. This is dreamy. So,
it is.
And tell me, because you started to talk about the expectations, because, I think that, regardless of our students' age, I think they're all very driven by, they're very task-oriented and very much still in the place where they want to please people. And I have to imagine that a recommendation from you might look very favorable, say on an application, or if they were applying for a job at the public library. So please tell me also some of the other responsibilities your library ambassadors have.
Sure. So they have, in terms of working in the library setting, each one of them has kind of their own section of the library that they are assigned to. And that is kind of their kind of second home. And they have to shelve books that are in their sections. And they also have to dust and clean and shelf read. And I try to break it up, and every semester they get a new section to kind of break up the monotony of it. And it's definitely a learning curve, because some students, they're just not familiar with the Dewey Decimal System. So we have to go back to square one and go back to, how books are organized and that type of thing. And, it's funny, a lot of times, and this, I'm sure, in an elementary library, students will go in the stacks and just make a huge mess. And our students get so aggravated because their sections were perfect and now they're not. So it's kind of the way that they can help run the library. I also have them do quarterly book reviews. So using an educational technology resource, they actually make book reviews, and then we post them on our library website for other students to watch or to share, through the links. And that's been helpful too, because it helps when a student's looking for a particular book. I could book talk a book and say it's the best book ever, but coming from a high school peer, I've noticed makes a huge difference versus me, to the point, even when I do screencast book talks or that type of thing, I actually have the students read my script. because I feel like it comes across different when the peers are recommending books. And again, some of the books are the books that the students like. Some of them might be, ones that they still need to read, but it just kind of helps. They make book trailers as part of their classwork. And again, this is usually they can do this in the library environment. If it's a busy day or something, they might need to work outside, but they have I give them plenty of time to do these assignments. It's not like I sneak up on them. They also have, as part of the job, as being a district librarian, I see the needs and I see kind of district visions. And so the students actually make children's books. And what we do is they make 2 children's books, one at the end of each semester. And then we actually take those books down to the elementary libraries and we share them with the elementary kids. And I will tell you that this was something new that I started with the students. And I am always amazed at the work my high school students put into these books. Sometimes they need some examples because it's been a while since they've read a picture book, but it's amazing. I had one student, to give an example, who has, she has severe anxiety and she has depression. And she actually wrote a book with herself as the main character, kind of telling her journey of dealing with anxiety and depression and getting help and that type of thing. And it was just a really emotional, touching book. And to the point I was kind of hesitant. I was like, I want to keep it here and share it with our students, but we ended up taking it to one of the elementary buildings. And the students, again, we display them. So the students in the elementaries know that the high school kids made these books. And that's a way we kind of share that. And
well, and I have to think that having such just a really authentic experience of being effectively part of the library team, they are part of your staff. Mm-hmm. And so they carry the responsibilities of running the library as a staff member would. I have to imagine you value their feedback when it comes to different areas of the library, because they probably are more... They might have, if they spend 20 minutes in a section, that's 20 minutes you don't have to spend in that section. So they might, their perspectives, I'm sure, are incredibly valuable because they are invested as part of the staff.
Absolutely. And something else too is that, they give me book recommendations all the time. For example, if there's a new book in the series that I somehow skipped over or forgot to order, they will definitely call me out on it and say, hey, we're missing book 3. We need to get book 3. And so they keep me on my toes in that way. And then also what I love is that I am not and I will admit it, I am not a fantasy reader. I do not read fantasy and I don't read a lot of sci-fi. So those just aren't the genres I gravitate towards. And I am blessed enough that every semester, every school year, it never fails, I have at least 2 or 3 students who are diehard fantasy and diehard sci-fi readers. And they are the ones who really help me make my collection development decisions. I give them access to Tidal Wave and I kind of just let them peruse the collection and make wish lists for me and giving them that voice of, I'm going to order this book because you recommended it. It is just awesome. And the students just really feel like they are responsible for what's happening in our library.
Well, and I do appreciate that. Sometimes I'll put my Tidal Wave up on my smartboard and the kids will gather around. What are you doing, Mrs. Herman? And I said, well, I just realized, like you said, I don't have the next book in this series. And they're like, oh, can we get that one? Can we get that one? And I'm like, look, all I do is I just put a check in that box and, oh, look, we just bought it. Look at that. And even my littles, you're looking at kids who are 8 and 9 years old, realizing it's something like telling a parent to buy something at the grocery store, that sometimes all you have to do is ask. And I think that students find that very empowering. I know I did that when it's hard for me to get excited about certain books, especially if it involves animals dying or people crying. Anything that requires you to have a tissue box next to you is not the kind of book I'm going to read for fun. But I recognize I do have readers who love a good cry. And that's at 11 years old. So I do value when they come up and say, Mrs. Herman, this is a book that I think your other students would like.
Yes, absolutely. Also, we have a book club. So we do, and again, this is open to any student in our building. We even have students who have graduated come back for book club. We meet every month. And we meet one day after school. And instead of all reading the same book, we read from a certain genre. So for example, we might have a month of graphic novels, or we might have a month of nonfiction, and basically the students come ready to talk about that genre. And high school kids are busy. They work after school, they have extracurriculars. And so there are months where they haven't read a book for fun. Maybe they just read a book for class, and that's absolutely fine. We still come and we still talk about books. And I always try to have kind of a stack of books. And one activity that I do that I love that we do for book club, I call it book speed dating. And what we do is I take books that have just arrived. So basically they're cataloged, they're ready to go on the shelf, but they're not quite out yet for students to get. And I basically pass out a random book to each student that's at book club. And I give them 1 minute to read the book jacket, look at the cover, peruse the book. And then what we do is we go in a circle and everyone shares their book like it was a date. And they talk about their date, and they talk about if they would actually go on a second date with that book, and if they would actually check that book out. And this is something we do, and the kids just love it. And that's why I have kids coming that have graduated, come back to book club just to participate in that activity, because it's a way to learn about new books. And it's just kind of fun because again, it's that whole preview aspect. It's that, no one else has got to check this out yet but me. And even the high school kids love that. The elementary kids love that. Just the high school kids do too. So that is something we do in our book clubs. We have snacks, which is always good, provide food, provide drinks for the kids. And it's just a really good time. And we're actually going to do a virtual book club next Wednesday.
Well, that was my next question.
Yes.
I'm like, we're all making adjustments right now while school is closed, but the show must go on. So how are you going to do a virtual book club?
So we are going to do a Google Meet, and I have a book club Google Classroom. So I'm going to just put all the information in the Google Classroom, and the students can join. We're going to meet at 1:00 on Wednesday, and we are, instead of talking about a genre, we're actually going to talk about conspiracy theories. Because last book club, that was a hot topic. So we're going to kind of all share different conspiracy theories. And again, that was kind of a student-driven idea that they had, and we're going to roll with it. And I hope to continue to meet virtually. And I'm lucky enough that I have 2 or 3 really dedicated book club students who are keeping me on my toes to make sure, hey, we need to do this. We need to do this. So that has been very helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, I'm really curious about your book scan events.
Yes. So I don't know where, if anyone else does this. Maybe we just do it in Northeast Ohio. But I belong to a consortium through our Educational Service Center. And part of it is that they have a library component to it. And what they do is every 3 months, they have what's called a book scan. And they work with Follett, and Follett provides brand new released books that have just come out, and there's probably close to 200 to 300 of them. And they basically set up a room in the Educational Service Center over 3 days. And we go from like 8 to 3 or something like that is when they're open. And the librarians that are part of the consortium can just go and actually peruse the books, look at them. And for me, there's nothing better than actually being able to hold the book, look at the book, read the book jacket, look at the image, look at the pictures, look at the text, and actually, sample the book per se. So we do that about 3 times a year, and that has really helped with collection development. And I actually have asked several of my library ambassadors to come with me to that. So it's a field trip for them, and they really they love it. It's one of the highlights, I think, of the school year for them.
I've never heard of this before. So, been doing this for 13 years. I've never heard of a book scan event. And now I need to ask a few more questions.
Okay.
Is this something that you think Follett offers? Is this something that other vendors offer? And when you say you go through your consortium, is this a county level consortium? So you're meeting with your we call it a RISA, a resource, but it's done by at the county level. So can you tell me, for like myself, if I wanted to have a book scan event, I'm in Wayne County, how would I approach the vendor? Would I approach my county leadership? How does one get this started?
Yes. So you could probably do it a couple different ways, as if you don't have anything like this already. So the consortium that we're part of is through Cuyahoga County, which is Northeast Ohio area, Cuyahoga County Educational Service Center. And the districts that belong to the consortium, they do have to pay, it's a minimal amount. I want to say it's about a quarter a student, 25 cents a student or something, to be part of it. And then once you're part of the consortium, then you have access to the book scan events. Now, the book scan is ran by a staff member, a former librarian, actually. She's a retired librarian. And she actually, reaches out to Follett, who then provides the books, and then she ships them back to Follett after the book scan. So it's kind of like a temporary sample type of thing. We used to use Baker and Taylor, which is no longer Baker and Taylor. They've been bought out by Follett. So that is why, it's a Follett. But I assume reaching out to vendors and asking them to do it, it's just basically a giant book preview is all it is. But again, having it facilitated at the bigger level allows for a lot of librarians to network. We use it as a networking opportunity, and it's something that we've always done. And again, I feel like we're spoiled in Northeast Ohio because it is a small library world, and we kind of all connect that way. And I look forward to the book scans just because I feel like I really am using my dollars to the best because I've seen the book. I know what I'm ordering.
Well, and I'm amused that you turned this into a field trip because I've heard of librarians hosting virtual field trips. That happens. But, coming home with that permission slip and saying, yeah, I'm going with my librarian to a book scan, really does create a whole new aspect to what we do. And then including students having their feedback because they're your audience. I mean, I got to tell you, I go grocery shopping and nobody wants to come with me. And if they only understood, my 17-year-old boys, if they only understood that it would remove all the guesswork out of the process of going grocery shopping, if they would just come with me, it is not only easier to go shopping, it is oftentimes faster to go shopping when you have your customers right there with you. So having that sort of, I love that. Oh, fantastic. Now tell me about your website and how you use Google Forms to facilitate student voice.
Yes. And also I wanted to mention before I forget that we also have in the past, we've taken a field trip, the library ambassadors and I, to Cleveland Public Library. And because a lot of our students, they have not been in an urban library setting because we're a suburban district. And so to go to a library like that and then to see how many books get returned and must be put back, it was hilarious. They took us on the tour and they knew we were high school students working in a school library. And so they showed them where the books get returned and how they have basically a conveyor belt that ships them off to the different areas of the library. And the students, you should have seen their jaws hit the floor because there's hundreds of books that have to be put back. And, our kids complain when they have to put back, 10 books. So it was just kind of funny for them to just see kind of how a public library works. And we got to see their maker space. And so just some awesome things. So also I would recommend, and we got a grant to pay for the busing and that type of thing. So that was something that we didn't have to pay for. So I would definitely consider anyone working in a high school setting or even a middle school setting, setting up a field trip like that with the local library with students who really like the library environment is really a fun time for them. But I just wanted to mention that.
But since you did mention it, looking at the bigger picture, because what we're doing, we are not just raising readers, because that is by including them in your staff, by including their feedback into your decision making, you are creating lifelong readers. But let's look at the more practical big picture. You are creating future taxpayers who will approve library millages, who will approve school millages. When you create someone who values and has learned the value of public libraries and of public schools and the school librarians in them, you are creating students who become adults, who become tax-paying adults, who have to vote on things like millages to support our public libraries, our schools, and our school libraries. So, big picture. Oh, I love it. I didn't see that coming. All right. Okay.
So back to my website. Yeah.
Now let's talk about the forums on your website.
Okay. So my virtual space, I do feel like we, as librarians have to have a virtual space for our students. It's the world we live in. We're not just the four walls in the schools. So my library website is actually set up through Gale. I use Gale as my website host. And I like it because I can link all my databases and kind of have a one-stop shop for students. And that's, having that convenience factor for them is critical. I do have on that website a link to a Google form that's always live where it's student recommendations. And I do make the form locked down in the sense that they have to have a district email to do the form, because I want to hear from our students in our school. But basically, I have the form running, and then I have notifications turned on in my Google form setting that basically anytime a user submits a form, I get an email. And then I can check the form and see what's been recommended. And when I do my library orientation at the start of the school year with all of my incoming ninth graders, I make sure to show them the website and I make sure to show them the form. And what's interesting is we are just now adding Overdrive at our high school library. And so I'm having a lot of students recommend things within Overdrive, which is an option. So that's kind of something new too, that, giving them that voice of, hey, here's a good idea that I don't see this right now in our Overdrive collection, but I would like to see this series, or I would like to see this title. So having that always running, and what's also nice is when a student checks out a book from me, face to face, if they say, hey, do you have any more books by, Sharon Draper? I really like Sharon Draper's writing. Then I make a point to just write it down right in front of the student. So they see that I'm really validating, I love that idea and I'm going to look into that some more. And having that conversation with students too is really important, but having that virtual space is I feel like equally important.
Yeah. To tie in, last week, I did an episode on tech tools for librarians. And this is where Google Keep is really important, because I do collection for multiple buildings as well. And so I have Google Keep going with different labels for each of my buildings. So when it comes to, books that I'm going to buy for them individually and books that both of them need. So I do use Google Keep for that. And I've also used like a Survey Monkey, which, some people like using. It's not nearly as sophisticated, because I think you can sort of flood the system with, multiple submissions. But I used Survey Monkey years ago for a series on the NBA, NFL, and MLB, because while I'm a librarian, I am not a sports aficionado. And so I said, listen, I will make a commitment to buy 5 from each category for the next 3 years. But I need you to tell me which ones. And then once we buy those, I'm going to pull those from the survey. And the next time, and again, it's long range. So you want to, over the next 3 years, I will make this commitment. And I shared that with my students. And I said, you guys get to vote. And then once I make those purchases, that you guys were the reason why those are the ones that were picked. And you'll have another opportunity in the fall and another opportunity in the spring. And I think that means a lot. I've gotten some good feedback. Invariably, usually when adults ask children for feedback, we are going to get a range of responses. And it sounds like you've been very fortunate because the responses you are getting are very helpful. They are made, they are sincere, they are made because your students value what you're doing for them. And then you get the other end, which I oftentimes see, which is the ridiculous. And how, Mrs. Herman, we need a trampoline in this library. Mrs. Herman, we need a cotton candy machine in this library. How do you establish some sort of understanding with your student body that, this is a program that is theirs, and when they contribute ideas, you value them?
I really am. I never turn down an idea, especially in front of the students. So at the middle school and high school level, both, I've worked with students on kind of that, reader's advisory piece, or we are getting, at our high school, we have a new collaboration space, and we had new furniture added, and I wanted student input on that. And again, I try not to kind of put down their ideas, even if they're, the most ridiculous ideas. But I do question their ideas. So, if they say, I want a trampoline in the library or want a slide in the library, and I say, okay, well, what do you think? Where would we put that? And why would that work? And, and basically get those wheels turning. And then, and I have had to have, discussions with my library ambassadors, because they don't realize that I have a budget, and they don't realize
there's
that
no money tree growing in the library.
Yeah.
I sometimes point to my invisible money tree. I said, children, do you see the money growing on the money tree? Mrs. Herman, there's no money tree. I know there is no money tree.
Yeah. So I had a student about a couple years ago who was a huge graphic novel fan, and God bless him, but he came in the library with about 4 or 5 stapled notebook pieces of paper with titles of graphic novels that we needed to get. And God bless him. I took the sheet and I sat down with him and I said, okay, here's the problem. I would love to buy all of these books because I think they're great. However, I can only order a set amount. So can you just go through with the highlighter and highlight, a set number, or highlight, the top 20, or whatever. And basically having that conversation with them and kind of bringing them back down to reality. But in a way that does not make them feel like, oh, I should have never said anything, or, oh, that was a waste of time, because you want to build relationships with your students, and you want them to value the library, and you want them to know that what they're saying to you, that you are listening, and that you're really, considering, what they're saying, and what's, because again, that relationship piece is so important, especially at the high school level, because again, I want them to feel like this is our library. They have a piece in this just as much as I do as the librarian. And it's just important to really kind of validate that, wow, I appreciate that you spent a lot of time in thinking of these ideas and giving me suggestions. And I'm definitely going to consider them, and I value your opinion, and I value your thoughts. And then for the students who give the book recommendations that, like the 50 Shades of Grays and those type of books that I just can't put in my library. I definitely show them that the public library has that item, and you have a public library card. And if not, you can stop by. Our local public library is less than 5 minutes from the high school. Get a library card. I'll show you how to put the book on hold, and we can pick, you can pick it up right then. So I definitely never discount their ideas, and I never make them feel like it's a silly recommendation.
I love that. I mean, it really does. All best practices when it comes to incorporating student voice in our programs, regardless of the age of our students. You've touched upon so many things. Before I let you go, do you have any unsaid advice that you would give to librarians whose goal it is to incorporate more student voice into their programs?
I would just say that I would recommend that librarians really build relationships with their students the minute those kids walk into the school building. And I do some extracurricular things. I go to the pep rallies. I am seen in the hallways. I'm in classrooms. And I really think it's important that we go outside of our library walls and we show our students that we are people and that we are teachers and that we're interested in what they're doing. And from day one, when I do my library orientation for my incoming ninth graders, I really make them feel like this is a comfortable, safe environment for them in the library, and that I'm there for them. And I think when you build that foundation with them, I think then they are more trusting. I feel like they then feel like they can come to you with ideas and suggestions. And it's just something that I think a lot of times we get so wrapped up in the tasks of the library and the things we have to do. And sometimes it's just a matter of taking time and building those one-on-one relationships with students, that quick couple seconds when they're checking out a book and you say, you know what, I really like your shirt, or you know what, I really like your earrings. That student's going to be more likely to come back to you in the future if they need help with their Chromebook, or if they, need help finding a research book because you complimented them and you kind of made them smile. So that's really important, just as much as the task that we do.
Wonderful. I do want to know, because a lot of my listeners love to add to their PLNs and their social media. And can you tell us the best way to follow you, to follow your program? What can you share with us?
Sure. So, and I have to say, Amy, that I have followed every single one of your guests.
I do see this as a PLN for me.
It is.
My guests and my listeners who have taken the time to reach out to the podcast, it really makes a very big difference in my life, especially right now when we are sort of sheltering in place and we are not leaving the walls of this house while we are doing our best to keep this COVID-19 under wraps. But you're right, because the guests that come onto this podcast, like yourself, who are generous in the areas of librarianship that they can share with others, are always going to be terrific to follow on social media, because they're going to share a lot of these ideas. And you're right, it's a great way to help us build our PLN on social media. So please do tell us how we can follow you.
So I'm on Twitter, probably the most, and you can follow me at Angela Wojtecki. So it's at Angela, Angela, and then my last name, Wojtecki. So you can follow me there. I also have a podcast that I do for our district that's called Nordonia Innovators. And there is a link to that in the show notes as well. But if you just Google Nordonia, Nordonia, Innovators, it will pop up one of the first ones, and you can listen to some of our podcasts that we do with our district. We just showcase some of the teachers and some of the things going on in our district.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, because that is where you feature fellow staff members in your district. Yeah. Can you tell us your some of the recent topics you've done?
Sure. So I was on maternity leave, so I kind of took kind of a back seat for, while I was dealing with that. I know. But recently, our most newest episode is with a school bus driver in our district who actually wrote a book about driving a school bus. And it's called Driven to Learn, Journey of a School Bus Driver. And I interview him in the most recent episode. And it was just one of the best interviews, because I think we don't really, as teachers, we don't know kind of the ins and outs of a bus driver in our district. And so it was great to kind of hear from him, hear what made him want to write a book. And it was just a really good opportunity. So if you are interested in that at all, check that out. But I also showcase teachers. I showcase our business director talking about kind of visions for the schools and kind of using that as a platform for what what's coming in the next couple of years in terms of furniture and maker spaces and technology and that type of thing.
Well, and I think that what a great way to get the idea, showcase your district in a way that your taxpayers might appreciate, getting sort of a deep dive into aspects of their community district. So you do win over support for that next millage, that next election to support your program. So that's great. Well, listen, Angela, this has been fantastic. Listeners, I'm going to make sure you check out our show notes. And Angela, stay well. And I look forward to our paths crossing in the future.
Oh, yes. No, thank you so much. And I'm a huge fan of this podcast. And I'm a lifelong learner like you, Amy. So I appreciate you doing all this for us.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so grateful that Angela was able to take some time out of her day to share her expertise and her experience and the success that she's having with her programs with some of us today. I encourage you to be sure to check out the show notes in the podcast, and you'll get a better idea of some of the things that we've described in the episode today. If you found today's episode helpful, please make sure that you recommend it to your team, your PLN, and maybe mention it on social media. The topic of our next episode will be communal space and my conversation with Sarah Marshall. I hope you will tune in.